Today, I want to talk about a problem a lot of us face wherein we have ambitious long-term goals, but we find ourselves getting overwhelmed as we daily seek to reach those goals. It's something I call the 2-bar strategy. And all of this came from an email I received from someone a while back who said, "For me, the biggest challenge is coming up with realistic plans. I always overestimate what I can actually get done in any given day or week and then get discouraged." This idea of raising the bar is where my sort of response to this comes from. We've all had this situation where we overestimate, sometimes dramatically, how much we can get done in a day. We have a really high bar for what we can accomplish in a day. And what happens there is we get discouraged because we keep not being able to jump over that bar at the daily level. And what happens with that is day after day, you stack up these days of incomplete plans. You start feeling bad about it. You start being discouraged, and it gets harder and harder, and it slows you down. And thankfully, these little failures to meet our standards do have a silver lining, I think. They remind us of our ongoing need for God's grace. I think my undone to-do list is one of the best reminders I have of how ineffective I am, how humble I should feel, and how much in need I am of God's grace. But still, that cycle of plan, fail, self-criticize, right? That can go on repeat, and it is not good for us. It's discouraging, and it's counterproductive to a fruitful Christian life. And so here's sort of the question that we're going to try to answer today. How do we set ambitious goals without being disappointingly unrealistic in our daily plans? How do I have a big goal I want to reach, but not just break myself in half because every day I fall short? So let's look at the 2-bar strategy. We're going to examine 3 parts of this. We're going to talk about raising the bar for your long-term goals and lowering the bar for your daily and weekly plans. And then we're going to talk really practical about how you put this 2-bar strategy into action. And so I do think this is an issue a lot of productivity-minded believers struggle with. As Christians, we recognize my life's a stewardship from God. So naturally, I want to make the most of the time I've been given. I want to redeem the time. And that means when it comes to planning our days, we can be overly ambitious. We can list out all the tasks we hope to complete. And a lot of times, those daily lists end up being longer than a CVS receipt and far more than anyone could actually hope to accomplish in a day. It's unrealistic. And that leads to that ongoing discouragement. But the first step, I'm going to argue, isn't lowering the bar. It's actually raising the bar, but not on your day-to-day work. The first step here with the 2-bar strategy is to raise the bar for our long-term goals. So if you've ever played sports, you've probably had a coach try to inspire you. So they say, we're going to raise the bar, get 110%. And the bar there it represents this aspiration of excellence. It's the standard. It's here is a high level of achievement I want to reach. I want to raise the bar on that. And so having a high bar means holding yourself to a high standard. And having high expectations for ourselves, I think, is a good and God-honoring thing to do. We should have big goals and big expectations of ourselves. We should seek to, within our capacity as servants of God, we want to steward what He's given us well. And I think daunting tasks, even big ones, they're well worth the effort if they're designed to honor God. And no, I don't think hard work and ambitious goals are antithetical to grace. I think they are actually the fruit of it. And we see this in the scriptures. We're reminded again and again, work heartily as unto the Lord. Do your best to present yourself to God as one approved. Offer yourselves as a living sacrifice. There's been this interesting anti-work movement that I've seen a lot about online. It's this mentality that's sort of in vogue right now. It's sort of semi-socialistic, but I have heard Christians talk this way too. This sarcastic sort of thing about like, well, we're doing this for the shareholders, right? And this idea, these big corporate companies, they're evil and they don't care about us. Capitalism's bad, right? And I'm not criticizing, I'm not here to challenge that and say that big companies care about you. What I'm trying to talk about here is the heart, is this attitude towards work, this anti-work attitude that a lot of times is happening out there and sometimes can be adopted by Christians, it is the fruit of grumbling and complaining and a sense of entitlement. that I approach my work with, I want to do as little as possible. I want to be as unproductive as possible without getting fired from it. That attitude is not what should mark a Christian. We should have high goals for ourselves, and take this outside of just work. Take this to the rest of life. Take this to all the domains of stewardship. I want to have high standards for myself for my physical health. I want to have high standards for myself for my personal devotion to the Lord. I want to have high standards for myself for my relationships and how I invest in them and invest in my church. I want to have high standards for my finances, that I'm stewarding them well, that I'm earning well, and that I'm giving well, and that I'm being faithful with how I reinvest that money, right? I want to have high standards. I want to set the bar high on the long-term stuff. And Paul talks about this in 1 Corinthians 9, verse 25. He says, every athlete exercises self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we an imperishable. And so I think in one sense, Christians should be the most ambitious people in the world because we're operating on an eternal timeline. We're not selfishly ambitious. We're not ambitious just for today or for this life. We're ambitious to honor the Lord in our families and our work and with our goals. And we want to be people with a high bar, with a high standard, leading lives that are marked by excellence in our efforts and in our goals, not half-hearted attempts, not sort of this laissez-faire attitude. And so I'm a big proponent of big goals. That's the big point I'm trying to make here. Set high bars on the long term, because big goals have tons of blessings. Big goals give you clarity of purpose. These are one of the practical benefits of setting ambitious goals. They give you clarity of purpose. Big goals, they provide a unifying motivation to your daily efforts. You recognize this is going towards something bigger. The reason I'm getting up early and doing this thing I don't feel like doing is because I recognize the prize at the end of it. Not just the perishable wreath that Paul talked about, but the imperishable reward. I recognize that living a life of faithfulness is rewarded by God. And so I'm going to do the thing, the big goal. I'm going to keep striving for it. And so it's motivating. Big goals also supply motivation to push you through hard times. Having a big goal when you're sort of in the valley of despair and you're kind of like, oh, what is the point of all this? It's this reminder that this is hard, but it's leading somewhere. I remember when we were some years back, we were at Yosemite and we were doing the hike up to Upper Falls. There's this part where you're sort of in this crevasse sort of thing. Like all sides of you are just sheer granite. And so you can't see anything. Throughout that hike, there's these little spots where you can stop and you see the falls and you're like, oh yeah, this is worth hiking up this giant mountain because these views are awesome. But there's this part where you can see nothing and it's very demotivating. You're like, what's the point? I don't see anything. I'm just going up, 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 and it hurts. And I remember when we were there, we asked someone that how much further. They just kept saying, not much further, not much further, not much further. It's going to be worth it. The view up there is insane. It's so worth it. The goal, the long-term objective is worth the present pain. If you don't set high bars for yourself, if you don't have goals, it's easy to just lose sight of that. Why am I doing this hard thing? That's the first step. That's the first step. You want to raise the bar on your long-term goals. The second bar is our daily or weekly plans. And our point here is to lower the bar on those. So raise the bar on your long-term goals, lower the bar for your daily and weekly plans. You want to make these more achievable. So going back to our original question that sort of kicked us off, how do we keep ourselves from overestimating what we can get done each day or each week and then getting discouraged? Well, after seeing what I just said, you probably think the advice to raise the bar could only make things worse. But no, this is where the second bar comes in. We might have this high bar for our goals and our domains of stewardship and say, yes, this is helpful on so many levels. And many ambitious believers, however, make the mistake of saying, hey, I need to jump a high bar every day. So if it's true that having a high bar for my long-term goals is important, how much more important to have that every day? So for me, just an example in my own life. Initially, I thought when I was writing books, I thought my daily writing goals need to match the ambitiousness of the book project itself. A book is a big thing. It's going to take a lot of work. So every day I need to put in a ton of work. I need to work myself to exhaustion. I need to set the bar really high in what I do each day. But what I found is when I tried to hold myself to the standard of writing 10 pages a day or something stupidly high, I almost never hit that daily page count. And after a few days or weeks of missing the mark every day, I was disappointed. I was discouraged. I would then put the manuscript away for weeks, and then I'd feel beat down again. And I'd be like, Reagan, you can't do any of this. You're not cut out for this. What are you thinking? All this negative self-talk. Where did it come from? I had a high long-term goal, but thought that I needed to match that with a high short-term goal. That's not true. I think actually the opposite of true. Set a high long-term goal, set a short bar for what you're doing each day and each week. Aim for consistency, not ambition each day. You just want to put in a little bit of work each day. Having impossibly high standards for your days and weeks is counterproductive. So I think our logic goes something like this. I say, if I'm going to reach big goals, I've got to have full and frantic days. That's just not true. God does call us to excellence, but it's not his desire that we live in a constant tornado of anxiety and discouragement. That's not the point here. We want to pursue excellence. We want to pursue faithfulness, but recognize that what's really required is small, faithful daily efforts. Not these Herculean feats every time. It's the same Apostle Paul who encouraged us to have that high bar for our holy life, to treat it like an athlete, to labor for that wreath which doesn't perish. But he also encouraged us to have the ambition to live a peaceful and quiet life. I always find this juxtaposition funny. He says, and make it your ambition to lead a quiet life. You should mind your own business and work with your hands just as we told you. It seems like oxymoronic the way he puts it, which is why it's one of my favorite verses. Ambition usually speaks of big, exciting, loud aspirations, but Paul's saying, no, make it your ambition to lead a quiet life. Have big dreams of a quiet life. I love that. I think that's so helpful in seeing the contrast here, which is a bit counterintuitive. How do we square this with Scripture's call to excellence, to effort? I think these two, even though they might seem at odds with each other, are perfectly complementary. You can have an ambition for excellence and a quiet life. Yes. Why? Well, in the kingdom, high achiever doesn't mean high anxiety. The high bar of excellence is not contradicted by the low bar of daily expectations for yourself. Because in the kingdom, big things always come from small beginnings. And God's greatest works often come from the most humblest starts. From the mustard seed comes a 10-foot tree. From leaven comes a loaf. From small things and slow growth compounding over time, it leads to big results. That's true in the natural realm, and it's also true with our goals. A reasonable day's efforts can do more to get you closer to that big goal than impossible plans that you never accomplish for the day or for the week. And yes, here's the amazing thing. You can have peaceful days working at a natural pace, even in pursuit of prodigious goals, massive goals. You can still have peaceful days and weeks. I'm not the biggest fan of Bill Gates, but I do like this quote from him. He says, most people overestimate what they can do in 1 year and underestimate what they can do in 10 years. Isn't that great? Most people overestimate what they can do in 1 year and underestimate what they can do in 10 years. It's the same concept. Let's modify it slightly. We'll say most people overestimate what they can do in a day and they underestimate what they can do in a year. Low bar, high bar. We have it completely opposite most of the time. We set these insanely high bars for our days and they only lead to discouragement. And yet most of us don't even have any goals at all for the long term. We have a low bar for the long-term goals and a high bar for the day. That's not the right way to approach it. Okay, so let's look at the third point here. How do we put this into action? What are some strategies? What are some tactics you can use to put the 2-bar strategy into action, even this week? There's this saying in the Navy SEALs, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. It is, we want to get things done quickly, but it's more importantly, we want to do them accurately. We want to do them right. So speed might be important on the battlefield, but not at the expense of accuracy. And I think even with us, with working towards ambitious goals, it's easy to get over your skis a little bit, right? We think, well, since the bar's so high, I'm going to have to rush through everything. I got to just get there fast. But often it's better to lower your expectations when it comes to the day-to-day, when it comes to the week. Your daily goal isn't to do all the things. It's to consistently put in a solid quality day of work that pushes you closer to the big goal. Slow is smooth. Smooth is fast. For more on this, 2 episodes ago, I think it was, I talked about in a day's work and how we think about a single day's work. And that is a nice complement to this episode. So if you're looking for something to listen to or watch after that, check out that one, In a Day's Work. It goes more into how do I think about how much I should try to pack into a day? How do I think about that in a way that imitates even the way that God works? Here's a few thoughts on putting the 2-bar strategy into action. First is plan your ambitious goal. Plan your ambitious goal. Actually have a goal. I tell people this all the time. It constantly blows my mind. I think we just live so myopic in today's world where we're constantly under the gun of urgency that most people have no goals at all. And I think we've got to change that. I think we've got to think long term. If I'm going to lead a life of faithfulness, I need to be thinking what's the next milestone? What's the area I need to grow in, and how do I strategically get there? This is one of the reasons in our membership in Redeeming Productivity Academy, we do these quarterly goal challenges. It's sort of this forcing function with accountability built in where we help people in there set a really specific goal and make a plan to get there, because we need help with that. We need help with making a clear goal that honors God, but also we need help with the accountability to help us get there. So most people don't even have goals. I'm saying you got to start with that. Have a big goal. Then create a lower than reasonable expectation for your daily input. I said before, create a reasonable expectation. I'm saying lower than reasonable because we're terrible at estimating time. Say, what can I actually do in a day? What's something that even if it's the craziest day, I could still get it done? For you, maybe it's an exercise goal and you say, I can do 5,000 steps. Make that the goal. You can always exceed it, but just make that the daily goal. Set it low. Lower the bar. For me, with writing, I said, okay, I can always write 60 minutes or 90 minutes a day, right? No matter what happens, most days I can do that and feel like, hey, I put in a good amount of writing. I don't have to write for 4 hours. I don't have to write 10 pages. With relationships, I have all these people I want to keep up with, but I don't keep up with anybody. I can text one person a day. I can call one person a day. That's not hard. It's a really low bar. But when you do that consistently, do you see how that compounds? You realize, wow, I'm staying in touch with everybody that I love in my life. I'm encouraging people like I ought to be. I'm cultivating relationships. Finally, this is sort of just sort of a meta point to all of it. Focus on managing morale. One of the things I've learned with tackling really big, long-term projects that require daily effort over time is that managing your morale is more important than trying to hit an arbitrary daily goal for output. I discovered with the writing stuff that when I finished a writing session with a sense of accomplishment instead of disappointment, hey, I did what I set out to do today, I had the motivation to come back and do it again tomorrow. Lowering the bar on what counted as a good day of writing allowed me to string together more successful days and eventually more pages, and all of this without that cycle of failure and regret and self-flagellation. It can be done. And just picture it. Imagine if every day you're just hopping over that low bar. You start planning this more reasonable workload for your day. Instead of demoralizing you, it builds momentum. Day after day, you're leaping over those low bars, knowing that each of these small efforts is bringing you closer to that high bar of your long-term goals. And that really, I think, is a better way to live. And that is the 2-bar strategy. But I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this. Reaching ambitious goals, it's not about a one-time Herculean effort of self-discipline. It's a game of consistency. Little by little, you leap over the low bars you've set for yourself each day, and eventually, one day, you turn around and realize you've flown right over that high bar. That's been my experience with it, and I think it's a better way to live and at a more sustainable pace that can serve us. So I would love to hear your thoughts on this. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Is this helpful? Are there ways you would modify this strategy? How have you seen this play out in your own work and in your own life? Let me know on YouTube or comments on Spotify. And thanks for listening or watching. I'll see you again here next week.